Well, good afternoon, Scott Baker.
Good afternoon, Mikey. It is the 5th of December, Friday afternoon, 3 o'clock Eastern Time. That's time for Lead Better, our chance to talk about today's field note. And today's field note is an echo of a theme that we have talked about before. There's a few little variations in here, but it's around this idea of micromanaging. It's field note 1639. The title is How Leaders Can Micromanage a Team by Owning Too Many of Their Problems. Now, the way that's stated, that it actually sounds like here's an opportunity for you. Here's how leaders can micromanage a team by
Yes.
owning too many of their problems.
How to
We
micromanage.
hope, how to micromanage. We hope that this headline comes across as a cautionary tale, right?
Yeah.
So, but who knows? Like maybe that's a way to go here. Maybe we all just need more micromanagement of us.
It's funny. The philosophy that kind of comes out in a statement that we've heard a few times around our firm is this idea of being too parental, right?
Yes, right.
And it kind of fits in the same way of like micromanaging. Some people might like the idea of managing in a parental way, but we have this tendency of talking about it in a way that assumes that most people don't want to be led that way, and therefore it's a problem. But it made me think, okay, what is too parental and what is not too parental, right? And the circumstance in my mind that might be a good through line for what we're talking about is do you let your kids climb trees? At what point do you let them climb trees? And how do you let them climb trees?
Right.
And as a parent, you end up managing this whole process to at some point you don't pay attention whether your kids are climbing trees or not. Totally up. But every stage of that climbing tree development is a parental decision. So I think I really need to unwind what it means to be too parental.
Let me give you like a window that might work here, right? Because I was actually just talking about this with someone in my neighborhood who was telling me about, a family on the street, and they kind of let the kids run wild, and there's this 8-foot high wall, and the kids just climb it and jump off of it, and they're like, something terrible is going to happen. And
this is
you're
the
like,
Carroll family.
I guess it could be right. Now, I'm generally, and maybe I don't know how you've gone over 6 kids, but over 5. There's a whole movement out there. This will come back around to the whole management and micromanagement of what they call free range kids, right? So there's this idea of the parents that, like, they live in Manhattan. I think Jonathan Haidt is one of these, the well-known Jonathan Haidt, where eventually they kind of came like, okay, the kids can just get on the subway. Like they can just go do what they need to do. We're going to give them guidance and parameters, but we're in this whole hyper, like, are you walking alone without your parent? And you kind of get a little bit freaked out, if like, gosh, they went down to the park. Well, I walk down to the park all the time. And actually, the odds aren't that much different of a kid getting hurt or abducted or by a stranger today than they were when I was a kid, right? In terms of the actual things. Our fear level is way higher because, well, we have social media. Now, the point is that when you look at this, and when I had with my youngest, who's done jujitsu and she's done gymnastics and she's pretty resourceful, but it was always like, all right, there's 3 categories here: bumps and bruises,
Right.
bleeding and broken bones,
Yes.
death and dismemberment, right?
Yes.
So is the thing that you're potentially doing, can you get bumps and bruises?
Right.
Right. Okay, that's one factor. Is it possible that we're going to need stitches or a cast? This is another category, right? And then is there another thing where it's like you've jeopardized the enterprise? Well, what's weird about that is you can actually apply all 3 of those categories in every scenario in this field note.
Yes, absolutely. And so what we're saying is the best leaders are okay with allowing your team to experience stitches and casts. Right?
Yeah, and bumps and bruises certainly.
Are
you okay? But you as a leader might need to get used to a few stitches and casts.
Yes. Okay. So I love this framework, but again, it feels like it's parental.
It does feel a little parental. Right?
So if we're trying to avoid being too parental, which is something I've heard many times, do we need a different framework? Should we not?
Well,
even
no. Well, here, look. As a parent, you're trying to launch kids, right? As a leader in an organization, C-suite, you can make some arguments about private companies, public companies. You actually probably have a fiduciary responsibility,
Yes.
if not to stockholders, to the organizational's owners, right? In some way, shape, or form. So we have this issue that says it's not just am I being too parental and directive, it's am I being the best caretaker, the best steward of resources that might not even be mine.
Right. And we're bringing in Bob Trejo here, who has
it's certainly an expert in these
has
things.
a lot of experience with the idea of watching kids climb trees.
This is true. Yes, we've set up this scenario. Yeah.
Being concerned that they're going to fall out of trees. So from a scout leader's point of view, Bob, do you set the tone early? And we're just bringing you right in on this we're talking live here.
Apologies for a technical
no problem. But at what point do you actually recognize this transition between bumps and bruises and broken limbs
and cuts? Like we put the categories here into three of the bumps and bruises, broken bones and bleeding, death and dismemberment. That was so for parents or for corporate leaders, this is kind of the level of how parental, because the field note talks about that, right?
Yeah, I think we don't start early enough in allowing anyone, kids, subordinates, direct reports, even senior people, even operating folks, with board members. I think we just have a predilection, a preponderance, a leaning towards being way too intrusive and wanting to solve problems. I think we were raised that way, hey, here's a problem. Oh, I'm going to fix it. Oh, gold star, right? As opposed to, wait a minute, you're squandering an opportunity to let somebody else do it. Let them do it.
Right. So,
on the climbing the tree thing, within the bounds of rational safety, right? Don't throw them off a cliff and say, figure out how.
Figure it out. Yeah.
Right. No, that's the point. If we use that framework in this analogy to apply to the organizational structures of our businesses, there's not a whole lot of death and dismemberment, right? Most of us aren't leading SEAL Team 6s here. Right. So as a result, we need to define for the organization what is considered death and dismemberment. We need to define for the organization. It feels like I'm going to step in and take control of a problem here at this stage, but maybe it's just a lack of that communication. I don't know that I've ever, with my 6 kids, I don't know that I've ever defined, these are the 3 categories. I'm going to let you break your bones. I'm going to let you do it. I'm probably going to call out right before you break your bone.
Yeah, right. Or if you ask me, I might say, think you might need a cast after this one.
Yes.
Psychologically, emotionally, financially, we've all seen that.
Yeah. Yes, but I'm not actually trying to avoid the opportunity for them to break any bones at all.
Sure.
It's fine if you break a bone. We've been through this before. We know that kids get casts all the time. And just having the experience of going to the emergency room is just fun. But I don't think I've ever had that conversation where I've defined it with my kids. Does it sound to me like here we do actually need to have that kind of definition inside of our organizations?
Well, go for it, Bob.
I think there's several interesting analogies, and people have talked about this. We have a behavior called "your decision is my decision," and what we're trying to do is encourage people to build enough confidence in someone, and then turn that into the granting of authority. So Mikey comes to me and says, what should we do for our next online presentation? I'll go, Mikey, you've done this so many times, and you knew the content so well. Whatever it is that you decide is what I decide, or you can almost decide better than I ever could. So when you translate that into an organization, right, and what you do is train leaders to actually look for opportunities to yield authority, to yield control, to yield direction. There's a switch. And I think once you actually start doing it and allow yourself to allow other people to do that, you can start making some headway. Part 2 of that is getting the people that you're yielding to actually want to and be able to execute on the authority you're giving them. Many of them have never done it before, right?
Yeah.
And you started with the kid analogy. I mean, I can't tell you the number of kids that come into our youth organization, and I'll have a situation like this, and they'll say, Mr. Trejo, should I do this or that? And I'll scratch my head and I'll say, how about if you decide?
Yeah.
And they look at me aghast. I don't think anybody's ever told them in their life, you decide.
You decide. Yes.
People have decided for them their entire lives, right? And I actually think nowadays that extrapolates later and later in life.
Yeah, right. More and more.
Helicopter parenting and lawnmower parenting, and it's, hey, my parents have
Right.
somebody has always done this for me, or coach has always told me what to do, as opposed to, hey,
they've helicoptered in.
Right.
And we actually started at the top of this before you jumped in with this idea of free range parenting, letting free range kids kind of go and explore and do their thing. But let me ask you this, because the back half of the field note really gets into this idea of, it looks at the consequences, meaning if you have a leader who is doing this and micromanaging and owning too many problems, what it builds is a passivity in the team that they actually become sort of almost, they're shocked, like it's the first time they've heard this if you hand it over. And yet probably, and that's the surprise, the leader is not like looking at themselves going like, I guess I'm the problem here. But I'm sure even in your youth organization, you've seen adults leading different groups, and you can probably map the ones that are doing too much control. Mm-hmm. And I would guess that then you have more passive participants from the kids.
Absolutely. Not only that, Scott, they yell a lot.
Oh yeah, right.
I think it's directly correlated.
Yeah. And they probably look at these other groups and they're like, how's it working so easily for you over there? Because I'm having to drag these kids to get them to do anything.
Or why are you so uncontrolled and disorganized, right? Because look, in an organization without a tremendous amount of centralized control, things can be non-centralized, right? And things may not go exactly the way and very methodically. Look, we don't want the captain of the 787 deciding how to fly the airplane, right? In certain constructs and in certain situations, right? And I came out of an industry where, you couldn't go to the bathroom without a procedure, to use on the way out. I spent many years in the nuclear power industry. So in certain places, you really don't want to yield a tremendous amount of autonomy, right? They're very proceduralized, they're very methodical. But in general, whenever one can, right, you should yield that. And the result will be different than the leader might have expected, right? But even when a small thing doesn't go a way that the leader might have wanted, everything kind of tends to work out. And the gains that follow by empowering staff and yielding that control, it's just astronomical.
But Mikey, don't you need to then have an organization where, to use Bob's sort of implication here, that there's a bias towards this, hand it over, let them do it, and that then you need the leaders of the leader to be okay with that. You need an organization where that you have 10 leaders, and if they were dictating, things might work a little more procedurally, and Bob's got his permission slip to go to the bathroom. But if they're going to ease it up a little bit to say, no, we're building robustness in our teams, that means it is going to be a little messier. But we actually, as an organization, have to be tolerant of that if we expect that from our leaders.
Yeah, it's culture of the organization, but it's also the culture of the team. To bring up a comment that David makes in our comments today about this, he said he watched a transition take place where a team leader was very much this way, very micromanaging, always owned everybody else's problems for them. And then when a new leader came in who was completely the opposite, had more of the philosophy of what we're talking about, the way that leaders should be, that there was a long transition time for the team itself.
Oh, right. Yeah.
They should do. And so my question to him and my question to both of you is, like, what, aside from just making people aware that there's a transition that's gone on, what is the actual practice that you should do to help that team transition from someone who was very micromanaging to someone who is like, I'm going to let you decide and perhaps rise and fall on your own ability to make these decisions on your own? How do you actually get the team used to that transition.
I have a couple of thoughts. I'd say let them know that you're going to do it, right?
Yeah.
Say, hey, listen, you may find me not answering you right away, right? Or allowing you to come up with solutions prior to my doing it. And I'm doing that on purpose. It's not that I don't want to be helpful, right? But I actually think you have it within you to solve the problem yourself, right?
Right.
The difficulty there might be discriminating and hoping that individual knows enough when, you know, they're really outside of their sandbox and need to escalate to you. So if they're really high consequence things, right? Some people might put a dollar limit on it. If you have a customer complaint that solving it will cost us more than X $1,000, right? You know, maybe you ought to do it. I think, and maybe we know this, maybe you guys can correct me on this, but I think it's Ritz-Carlton allows any employee, this could be the janitor or the housekeeper, right, to solve any customer problem and spend up to $2,000 doing it. I mean, think about that, to yield that amount of authority to anyone, to create a culture that I want you solving problems. I don't want you to come and ask me anything. And you can spend up to $2,000 to do it. That's pretty cool, right?
Yeah,
but it also pounds it, right? If they're going to bankrupt the corporation, then they need to
they're doing that. There's probably been a lot of development for the guidelines of how you do that.
I'll bet.
Yeah.
So I think you tell people, right? I think you need to force yourself out of the arena. So I found myself like skipping meetings or showing up for a little bit of a meeting, talking about the agenda and then leaving, or coming in at the end and letting folks know, like, I want you guys to decide this, decide how we're going to proceed or how to solve the problem. And I'll show up at the tail end and we can discuss it together, right? That at least gets the ball rolling as opposed to them sitting around waiting for the leader to show up, right? The alternative from the bottom up side would be to empower people or tell people, if you have a boss that is a manager that's way too controlling, come in with a pile of solutions. Try showing them that you actually have the wherewithal, or even say, hey, can I decide on this one? Right now, you got to be careful there because you might be going pretty far out on a limb for a very old school controlling type of manager, but it's worth a try.
Well, Mikey, I think I realized what happened. You and I started this, and we're not. Bob said he had some technical problems. What if Bob just intentionally is like, I'm going to wait for like 3 or 4 minutes, and let's just see if Scott and Mikey know how to begin talking about this, and then I'm going to come in and see how it's gone. I think this might have actually been a test of the field note.
In fact, I got to go. No.
You got to go now. Okay, we're done. Yep.
No, we actually do keep these to right at 15 minutes, and we're a couple minutes over, so that's a great way to end it.
Cool.
So, Bob, thanks very much for joining us today.
Absolute pleasure.
All right.
Good day.
See you, Mikey.